Alright, troubleshooting the no spark issue was shooting wires. The ohm meter and the timing pickup here was coming out at 120, and it's supposed to be 190 plus or minus 20%. So I have another one that was off of my 2012. When I put the new stator in it, I got all new pickups and everything since I was in there and put them all in, and one of the old ones was still testing good. It was at 187, so it's really close to 190. So put that in there. It says they're the same part number between the 2012 and the 02, but the mounting tabs were actually different. I actually used a Dremel and ovaled out the holes so that I'd be able to screw it in because it had a wider base on this one. But we've got her in there. We'll get it back together and see if we got some spark. Alright, I figured out the no spark issue. It was actually the ECU went bad, so I bought a part sled to get the ECU, plus I needed some other parts. I needed a different servo motor because taking that one out of the other sled, that broke. So got a part sled to get all those little parts I needed. The crank seal on this end of the crankshaft was bad. I've already pulled it out, but I've got to split the case to put the new one back in. I'm going to be taking the seal out of the motor from the part sled. The reason I'm taking the seal out of the part sled was originally I was told it ran fine and everything from the guy I got it from. Said the guy he bought it from, it ran fine. He just needed to get a new seat for it, or gas tank, because there's a hole in the gas tank. But I pulled it over to make sure there was spark, because that was my primary concern, was since I didn't have spark on this one, is if it had spark, I knew at least those parts were good. And it had spark, so I went ahead and bought it, but I made sure I bought it for cheap enough that it was worthwhile for just the parts, not for the engine, because if I can't get something to run or hear it run and know the engine's good, I just always assume it's bad, and this is kind of why, because the guy told me it ran just fine, but when I got the engine out and was getting ready to swap them, there's a hole in the bottom of the crankcase. So it didn't run fine, so either he was lying to me or the guy he got it from lied to him if, he was telling me the truth. So yeah, that engine's not going in. Since that's got the hole in the crankcase, I'm just going to pull the crank seal out of the end on this one, since it's still good, or at least better than that one was. The one on the other one was missing this whole inner ring here. There was a good 1/8 of an inch all the way around the crankshaft between the seal, so this one's at least touching the crank. So we'll get that one in there and go from there. But that's, yeah, if you can't get it to run, always treat it like the engine's blown, because they'll tell you it ran fine, and then you find something like that. So alright, we got the new crank seal in the engine now. The big hurdle we have now is getting the airbox figured out, which that one's not going to work. So one is too close to the engine for the throttle bodies to even fit in there. The hole's too small for their barrels to go in there, and the angle's way off. So I'm going to end up building an airbox. I'll just make it out of some aluminum sheet, and then basically replace all of this with the airbox that I'm going to build, and then I'll try and use that to go up to the air intake on the hood, just like it did stock as the plan. So that's what we're shooting for, and we'll see how it works out. Alright, it's slowly coming together. Still got to build the airbox. I'm just kind of putting it off, I guess, because that's going to be probably a day's worth of work, just building that all out of aluminum. I'm going to use the rubber cups from the Arctic Cat airbox and be able to rivet those to the aluminum housing I'm going to build. And then we moved the mount on this side for the clutch cover that also has the ECU and oil can and everything on it. Moved it up about 1 inch You can actually see, well, I guess about a ½ inch. You can see the hole from the old rivet right there, and then where it's at now, and that was just the, since this engine's sitting up higher in the chassis than the Polaris one, it was too close to the clutch. So now with that moved up, it's got plenty of clearance. Got the Arctic Cat coil mounted where the Polaris coils were. I believe the reason I ended up having to get a different ECU was that the ohm load was twice as much on the Polaris coils as on this one, so I think it must have fried the other ECU, and that's why it wasn't getting spark. Got the power valve servo motor. Gonna actually mount where the solenoid was on the Polaris, the pressure solenoid for power valves. Got the Polaris pipe in. I need to, once I get the can all situated here, which this is out of a, used to be on my M1000, and then a buddy actually had on his M8 for a while, but it's small enough to fit in here, and it's going to sit something like that, I think. I might change the bracket on the bottom and make it go more straight up and down, or might have it to go that way and keep the angle with the bracket, because that'll get it close to that pipe and help heat away from the belt drive there. And we also need to hook up the exhaust breathers. This comes out from where the power valves are at, and there's a little plate that I took off the Arctic Cat chassis that's supposed to rivet in here. I just haven't done it yet. Wait until I get the can and everything in there to see where it's going to be a good spot to where this doesn't get too hot next to the can or anything. But that's kind of what we're working towards today, is getting the can in, and need to get the bolts for the clutch all figured out. I want to use the Polaris clutches, especially the primary. I actually had a Powder Special 600 Arctic Cat that the Arctic Cat clutch actually blew apart on it, and I found a Polaris one used and put it on, and it actually worked a lot better even with the Arctic Cat secondary by having the Polaris primary. So I really want to try and keep the Polaris primary. But the Arctic Cat is a 33mm tapered bore, 110, and the Polaris was a 30 110. So I got a reamer here where I could ream it out, so it's now the proper diameter for the Arctic Cat crank. But then got to figure the bolts out, which these are the Polaris and the Arctic Cat clutch bolts, so there's quite a difference in them here. And the only thing I was able to find in a 1/2-20, which is what the Arctic Cat threads are here locally, was a 9-inch bolt. They didn't have any 8.5-inch bolts, which are what the Polaris one was. I thought I'd give it a shot, but even at that, it's way too long. So I'm going to end up taking a tap and tapping threads longer in it, and then cutting it shorter till we get the exact right length here. Because even with, when I ran this in all the way till it bottomed out, there's still about roughly 2 inches, we'll say, up here, but then that would have been bottomed out in the thread. So ideally would have been about a 6 3/4 inch long bolt, and at least locally I can't find any 1/2-20 that'd be 6 3/4. I can't even find 6.5 or 7-inch ones. So just gonna tap it out and make it work. Got the can all mounted in with pieces off of the old Arctic Cat pipe, and the connector or coupler off the can moved up and over. Got a mount going to the chassis there to help hold it from bouncing out. Got the breather from the power valve all in. Working on the air box. Got it that far. still teaching myself how to TIG aluminum. It's better in some spots than others, but we're getting there. And then trying to figure out where to go from here. Now I'm gonna bring this edge up and in to get past the steering post, but then to fit the double stacked ECUs, I can't use the factory duct in here, so I think I'm gonna temp some stuff and just see how it looks for airflow wise, because it's not going to be very thick here. So I guess if I can get it inch and a half thick and run it wide enough, then it should be enough flow, hopefully. But that's what we're shooting for right now. Got the clutch all bolted down. Got Arctic Cat red spring in it, and then the weights out of the Arctic Cat clutch in it. The older Arctic Cat weights will work in the Polaris clutches. The newer ones won't. I use the Arctic Cat red spring because I have a bunch of them from sleds over the years. And then the Arctic Cats, they give you a really low engagement with the red spring, but when you put them in the Polaris clutch, it has engagement up around 4,000. So it seems to work pretty good, and I don't have to buy a spring that way. And then when we get her all going, we'll see how the clutching works out and tune it from there. I got the air box all done. Got the Arctic Cat airback box boot riveted on and sealed the corners. Got the Arctic Cat air intake sensor in it. And got a screen down in there, or some expanded aluminum, so we can put some foam in there to keep chunks and stuff out. And then got a tab here so we can mount it to the frame. Yeah, that'll be it. It's like a puzzle. Spent a lot of last spring and winter, whenever I started on this, can't even remember now, and most of the summer, or a lot of time throughout the summer and everything, and even some more this fall, trying to get the tack to work on this Polaris with the Arctic Cat engine. Ended up going with just putting the Arctic Cat tack in the Polaris hood. Not really what I wanted to do, but that's where we're at. I mean, on the Polaris one, I could get the speedometer to work, but I couldn't get the tack to work, and that's way more important for making sure you're not over revving and clutching wise. It may be nice to have speed as well to really be able to tune it in, but I'll just have to go by the feel on that one, I guess. But at least I'll know what I'm revving at. But going through the wiring diagrams and asking, Polaris techs and forums and internet searching and all that stuff, I couldn't find anything that said how that pod actually gets its signal. Everything you read basically says, oh, they just take wires off the stator, but that's all for the older style, like that Arctic Cat gauge. That's why it works, because I just take the 2 stator wires off the Arctic Cat one. It's all wired up in here. I guess you can't really see it, but you just got the yellow and the brown, your ground and your stator power, and I got it. It's all tapped in the harness. It was all already coming up here to the Polaris gauge, the same signals. I just had to put a different plug on the end so it hooked to the Arctic Cat gauge. Arctic Cat one works just fine. Still couldn't get out of the Polaris one. Tried running signals through the computer, the Polaris computer, tried going straight to it, tried all kinds of stuff. Just looking through wire diagrams, let's try this, and then just other random stuff, back tapping. I tried using the pickup coil off the Arctic Cat motor and running it into the Polaris ECU and then out, and it's still, just wouldn't work. But anyways, so I said screw it, put the Arctic Cat tack in. I've got the wires all bundled up instead of that rat's nest that was here before. It's still a little ratty up there, but we'll see how we can clean that up when we get the hood on. I've never had the hood on this since I got it, really, other than just setting it there. The only other thing is the power valves still aren't working for the Arctic Cat motor. I'm not really sure why. I've tested the servo motor itself, and everything tests perfectly. The I even tried taking the stator out of the other motor because the spark issue, I think I covered this a little earlier, but anyways, the lack of spark was from the burned up the Arctic Cat ECM, so I got a different one out of another part sled, and the power valves weren't working, so I thought, well, I'll take the stator out of that one because they were slightly different years, so maybe that's a problem. It does run better with the other stator, but power valves still don't work properly, so I've just got them wired open for now. It'll run that way, it'll have full power, it'll just have less in the bottom end and probably be a little fat in the bottom end, but whatever, plugs are cheaper than engines. But yeah, so they're all bundled up, so now we're going to try and get it tightened up more, actually get the hood mounted on and the side panels on, and try taking it for a spin.